There's a guy named Guccifer who has Guccifer who has hacked into George W. Bush's emails, and he's gotten all these private emails and correspondence. He shouldn't have done that. It's terrible. We shouldn't know what they're talking. They're talking about possibly a eulogy at George H.W. Bush's funeral. Of course, he hasn't died yet. So, but you got to plan those things out.
Not only not, he's better.
Yeah, he's better now. But you're going to plan that out. But you don't want the world knowing that. It's sick. Don't do that. Look, there's good hacking on information the public needs to have, WikiLeaks, etc. Right? And the government hates that, but I love it because we're in a democracy. We need to know that information. We don't need to know what the private events of the Bush family.
So you're telling me that George Bush, who instituted the Patriot Act, which allowed the government to then go through your emails without a warrant and not tell you about it, someone did that to him? How outrageous.
Well, consider me busted, because that's such a great point. Now, but look, I'm against it when you do it to Bush. I'm against it when Bush does it to us. Right?
Okay.
So it shouldn't be done at all, but you're right, there is supreme irony there, and he should be the last person on earth to complain.
Yes.
And since you bring up that good point, let's share just one thing that we have found out through these hacks. Now, I don't want to get into their personal lives, but apparently George W. Bush is now a painter.
He mostly paints Texas landscapes and dogs. I mean, like barren Texas landscapes and dogs. Like nothing. It's of course that's what George Bush paints.
But you know why? Because he paints what's in his head.
Right, totally.
And it's like barren and dogs. Like, hey, dogs. I like dogs.
He loves dogs.
Like he'd paint baseball, but that's too complicated.
Too complicated.
So he's done a self-portrait. And boy, everybody's psychoanalyzing the hell out of this already. Let's show you the portrait. Okay, now this is apparently, really, George W. Bush did this. Okay, now he's in a shower. The immediate analysis from Gawker, I believe, was he's trying to wash off all the sins of his administration, right? Yeah. And then they say the mirror where he's looking at himself is, of course, an improbable angle, meaning that of course, he can't really see himself that way because his head is facing the wall, right? And they're saying, oh, that's he's peering at himself.
It's like his conscience.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Except I think Bush thought, nailed it.
Yeah.
Like he didn't, that wasn't art. That was like, oh yeah, right. Forgot I was facing the wall there.
Yeah.
Or the picture in the mirror is the other guy in the shower.
Ooh, now that would be some meaning.
Maybe it's the painter.
Yeah. It's like I like the contours in his back. It's not bad.
He's slumped over a little bit. He's tired from all the presidenting, as you would say.
That was a word I was so positive that he was going to use. Like Jack and I had a bet that before he was done,
like 2000,
he would say presidenting is hard. He never did it. Never did it. Yeah.
And if there's a guy behind him, and it turns out it's the guy who's about to da-da-da, and it looks like him, the symbolism is, man, I just screwed myself.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying?
This is deep.
And he has no one to blame for those 8 years of his term other than the guy in the mirror, George W. Bush.
This is heavy duty, man.
Okay.
I like how that whole thing about how, because he couldn't be the angle of the mirror, it couldn't work out, so it must be a symbolic. I'm sorry. Or he's a shitty artist. How about that? You ever think George Bush doesn't know how to paint? Like everything else he doesn't know how to do?
So that's the thing, right? If you're George Bush, I'm mixed on this, right? Because half of me says, I'm glad he's trying something, right? Okay. And the other half of me, like, just divorced from the fact that he's a war criminal and all that, right? Okay, as a human being, right? On the other hand, don't do it, dude, right? Like, it's like me doing poetry. Right, don't do it, man. It's not in your field of expertise. You're just going to embarrass yourself.
I'd rather go to a George W. Bush art gallery than a Cenk Uygur poetry reading.
I think you'd make a mistake because there's no way you're not going to laugh harder at the poetry reading.
Yeah, maybe.
But they say that when you create art or when you draw something or paint something, it does reveal something what's inside of you. So I do think your point is actually correct. There's nothing inside of him, really. He's an empty vessel who's not a deep thinker, and so he's painting these landscapes. This is the most interesting thing he painted.
And also,
right?
it suggests the empty vessel. It also suggests, I mean, first of all, analyzing it seems ridiculous, but what else are we going to do?
Right.
It also suggests, and I'm stealing this from Dan Frumkin, who I admire enormously, but it suggests a tremendous self-absorption, and very typical, and the self-absorption that he had for 8 years, and that he would continue to have now. He also thinks that, because you know how when you look in the mirror, like when, you know, how it's reversed, right? So I think you might be onto something with thinking he nailed it. He's like, no, if I look here, then I would see perfectly into the mirror. You know, so he's like, got it, not gonna fool me, mirror.
Yeah, you know, so first I read 3 Shakespeare's in a Camus, then I went and painted myself in the shower. Okay.
Now there's another painting that I saw today. I don't know if it's one of his. Did you see of his legs in the bathtub?
No, I did not.
I don't know whether that was jive or not, but it was in the same style. It looked like a bush.
It looked like a bush. Yeah. So then it wasn't him. It was
right.
Yeah. Okay. All right.